former FBI agent and ABC News contributor Brad Garrett for more on this. Brad, we're learning now that the shooter sent these messages to a friend before the shooting. Do you think those messages can help police identify a motive here?
Well, maybe. It depends on how long they are. But what's more important, Diane, that she actually sent them. Think about the mindset of most mass shooters. It's about power and recognition. It's not uncommon for mass shooters to reach out to folks that are close to them. Maybe a brief message. I mean, she's pretty direct about that she's going to die today. That's pretty clear. Now, I suspect there's no other detail, but it is a sign of somebody that's clearly headed for destruction of themselves and, sadly, others.
Now, Nashville Police Chief John Drake spoke on GMA today about how proud he is of his officers. He said they did exactly what they were trained to do. What do you make of the police response here, and what lessons can be learned?
So this is another great example of how training in the last 20 years or so have saved countless lives, where, prior to 25, 30 years ago, police would tend to wait on a SWAT team or a tactical type team to go in. They don't do that anymore. They train frontline officers. There'll be officers typically in a city of size, trained with heavier weapons, and they will respond initially to a shooting. And because they were able to do that, if you watch this shooter come into the building, look at her. She's methodically moving. She's very clear about what she's going to do. That means she would have continued to shoot until the police showed up. If it had been 10 minutes later, I don't even want to hazard to guess the number of casualties there might be.
Brad, the shooter had 2 assault-style rifles and a handgun at the time. Police are now saying they also found more weapons at the house. What does that tell you about this attack and what could have happened had police not responded that way?
So it tells you that she was completely preparing to do this. If you look at other mass shooters, sometimes they spend weeks, if not months, planning their shooting. And part of that's to build up in themselves maybe the power to go do it. But with maps, detailed maps, even where the cameras were in the school, think about the level of detail that's going into this, Diane. And that is because this is the high mark for her. This is the high point of her life, is committing this mass shooting. Now,
Brad, we heard Eva say it at the end of her piece, and we've said it before, gun violence is the #1 cause of death for children 1 to 19 in this country. So what can we do? I know this always sparks debate about gun control, and we will be hearing that in Washington. But from a law enforcement perspective, is there any more that can be done to try to get ahead of these and prevent them from happening?
Maybe. I think just set aside gun control and restrictions of different types of guns, because it's just not going to happen, at least in the short term. So you look at what you have. Maybe aggressive red flag laws. In every setting, schools, factories, office buildings, the environment that's in those places, and obviously we can't control how people interact with each other, but it's messaging. It's people coming forward saying, I've got a coworker, I've got a student that sits next to me, and they tell you some really troubling things. Now, a person may not become a mass shooter, but they've got real trouble and real problems that need to be addressed. It's really about information. I think that's the most realistic, and I totally understand that's easier said than done, but that's what has to happen. And the second thing is you have to have law enforcement with the time and ability to investigate the backgrounds of some of these troubled people. Unfortunately, this country's not set up that way. I mean, we have trouble even maintaining enough officers in a given location. So it's a bit of a pie in the sky, but if you look at what we have on the table, and if you look at the difference between folks that are pro-gun and anti-gun, that sort of falls in the middle. But that's all about us talking and communicating with each other.
Which it feels like we're getting worse at rather than better at sometimes. Brad, where does this investigation go from here?
So the key, you will look at this case if you're the law enforcement folks and the prosecutor, like you would if the shooter was still alive, and you would have to prosecute her. They're going to collect, obviously, all of the evidence at the scene, at her residence, through her computers, through social media, through friends, where the weapons came from, how did she acquire them? And you might ask, well, why are they doing that? She's dead, there's nobody to prosecute. Because the more you understand what happened and when it happened, and maybe what was the tipping point for her, it could help us potentially get in front of another mass shooter.
All right, Brad Garrett, thank you for that.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.